Hi students, I am making the screencast because we may not have time to review this in class. However, I want to say that if after watching this screencast you want me to talk about this for about 15 to 20 minutes tomorrow, then I'm more than willing to do that. So this week's chapter was assessing student learning and using results. Now I want to review this chapter briefly, or some key ideas in it, because I think it applies to our small group project. So when we take a look at this idea, the question comes up is, why is assessing so important? Well, we assess because we want to know where our students are. We want to know what they know. We want to know what they don't know. We want to know what they know in reference to what they should know. And we want to know in terms of, all right, what do we need to go back and figure out to make things better? So assessing takes many different forms. You can have it for the purpose of forming an opinion about students' abilities and skill sets. You can use it to judge students' abilities and skill sets. You can use it to determine where students are in reference to other students. You can use it for formative. You can use it for summative, meaning this is your final grade. You can assess using a standard assessment. You can assess students using differentiated forms of assessment. You can assess students with a paper pencil, multiple choice, oral, essay, project. There's multiple ways that you can assess what students know. And the question is, you need to know why. You need to know why students have developed the understanding that they have developed, and you need to know why you have been successful or not been successful. So there's multiple reasons. Now, I talked briefly about formative versus summative. A formative assessment is to give students feedback so they know what they need to do better, so that you need to know what you need to do better. So formative works for both the instructor and it works for the student. Summative is where you make a decision that the student has mastered the content that you're teaching, and now you can go ahead and move on to the next. Then there's norm referenced versus criterion referenced. Norm referenced is where you're comparing someone to another person, and you're looking to see who is higher and who is lower. Norm referenced isn't particularly important in terms of deciding if a student has mastered concepts. What it does is it lets you know where you are in comparison to other people. You think about maybe a norm referenced assessment. If you ever look at Zillow, or if you look at HGTV and they talk about pulling comps. Well, for comparable houses in an area, then they say this is what the average home is selling for. Not necessarily what that particular home is unique about or distinctive, or the ways that it's distinctive. It's just a matter of how it compares to everybody else. With a criterion referenced, it's an absolute score. Either you make it or you don't make it. Either you produced the characteristics or the product that you're supposed to produce, or you don't. So, to the nitty-gritty of what I'm talking about here. You are in the middle of a group project. Tomorrow, you will be working on your group project. Now, there's a variety of reasons that people say group projects are challenging. Some of the reasons that they say they're challenging is that you have to depend on someone else, that there's conflicting ideas about what needs to be done, that you may put in extra work and then someone else might not put in the same work. Those are some of the common objections to group projects. And the truth of the matter is, life is a group project. We need to learn how to work with each other, and we need to learn how to depend on each other. There's very few scenarios where you find that someone is accomplishing something on their own. And in education specifically, it's a huge group project. You and the students, you and your colleagues, you and the administration, you and the parents. You're working in groups of people all the time. For best practices in group projects, it's important to assign individual and group grades. And another best practice is to have each students grade each other in terms of their effort and their contributions. Never easy, but still important. One of the things that I instituted about 3 years ago on the individual progress reports was the idea that you could uninvite someone from a group. And so if someone is just not performing, if they are consistently not doing what they're supposed to be doing, then it is possible to have a group meeting, which is never comfortable, but to have a group meeting and say, listen, we can't depend on you as a group member. And it's important that we're able to work with people that we can depend on. So therefore, we need to uninvite you from the group. And there has to be good evidence to support that. I've had those conversations. I've removed people from groups. It's never comfortable. It's never easy, but it does happen. Now, when you're looking at evaluation, everybody's wild about rubrics, and I believe that rubrics have their place. I don't believe rubrics should be tied to every single assignment that you do. But I do believe that for some assignments and some projects, rubrics are absolutely appropriate. And I believe that the rubric is appropriate here. And you can have analytic rubrics, holistic rubrics. The rubric that we're using for the small group project is an analytic rubric. So let's take a look here at the rubric that you have for this project and the scale by which I'll be evaluating your work. So this is number 2 in your Google Drive folder. And it's on a 4-point scale, 4 being excellent, 1 being poor. Think back to when we did the 6-trait writing rubric, and I introduced you to the concept of rubrics. Some of you might have already had that background experience in your K12 educational journey. Others, that might have been the first time that you'd seen it. But with the 6-point rubric, we had the bold gold, meaning it was stronger than weak. Weak white, meaning it was weaker than strong. Here, if you look at the rubric, good and excellent are to the left-hand side. 3 and 4 are essentially passing. 2 and 1 are to the right-hand side, meaning that they're essentially failing. They're not really hitting the mark. Now, all of these criteria are matched to much of what I've taught you throughout the semester. So content evidence of research. This aligns to the criteria that you saw in your guidelines, as well as the library orientations. When we went to the library, you were taught how to find scholarly material, and you were taught how to determine if it was peer-reviewed or if it was not peer-reviewed, if it was credible or if it was not credible. So my expectation is that you learn those lessons, that you internalize that information, and that you then are applying that knowledge to your small group project. Coherence and organization. This is fairly easy because I've given it to you. I've also given you the guiding questions of the information that you should be addressing. And I've given it to you in an organizational structure. You have the federal, the state, the local, the district, the administration, and the teachers when you're looking at the positive implications and the negative implications. And I've asked you to look at the same set of criteria, but to interpret your information to determine if it's positive or negative. Note, I'm not saying pros and cons. This is not a pros and cons assignment, but it's what are the implications of this issue? What are the impacts or the effects that has? Not if it's good or bad. That's far too simplistic. So you want to make sure that when you're analyzing your information and you're talking about policy and you're talking about funding, that you're clearly identifying where it fits in this overall structure. And again, I've given that to you, but then you also want to make sure that you're talking about it in the proper format. Now, this is one of the conversations that we've had, which students have had some difficulty with. Every slide has to be readable. And in a few moments, I'm going to show you a presentation and talk about whether or not it is meeting the criteria. Audience response, I've been modeling that all semester long. The easiest form of audience response is a think, pair, share. You don't want to go more than 10 minutes max without having some way of stopping and having your audience involved in what it is that you're saying. And audience response is not a jeopardy at the end. That is a form of assessment. It's not an audience involvement. So think that through. You could have paper pencil audience involvement. You could have them thumbs up, thumbs down. You could have them have a paper that says agree, disagree. You could do a variety of things. But every 10 minutes is when you want to think about having some form of audience response. Presentation should be about 50 to 60 minutes. It's harder with you in this course. It's hard for you to get out under 60 minutes, but I expect at least 50. And then all of these pieces, the guiding questions, are designed to help you really address this information. And you will understand how this will impact you as a future teacher, understanding the history and so on. And then I'm looking for you to have very good speaking skills, that you dress for success for the most part. I don't write that here, but dressing appropriately truly helps you with feeling polished and feeling professional. So here I have a presentation that students made several years ago, about 10 years ago, and I want to go through this to give you a sense of how to evaluate it based on the rubric. So I think it's a good idea to print that rubric that's in your Google Drive and review it and look at it while I'm talking through this presentation. So from a computer screen, this isn't bad. It's readable in the sense that you can look at the dark lettering on the dark background. However, remember where you are presenting. In a large classroom setting with bright lights on the board, this is extremely hard to read. Easier to read if you turn off all the lights, but then how can your peers really evaluate you if they have all the lights off and they're trying to write on papers? So you want to make sure that you have a background and a font that are appropriate for a large room setting. You're absolutely free to come in and to use the computer station and to play with font colors on your presentation and to play with background colors and project it to see how that's going to look. That's absolutely appropriate for you to do that. Here, one thing that if you look at your rubric where it talks about the slide format, it says slides easily readable, follows the 7x7 rule, font size at least 24, images, film, and or audio clips incorporated greatly enhance the text. Each slide clearly labeled with either intro slide, relevance to K12, positive implications, negative implications, implications for student achievement, and references. So here we have what is ADD in the title slide position, or in the title of the slide position. As your instructor, I will be marking this off because it's not a 4 excellent where it's clearly labeled for me. My strong recommendation is that every slide for the section on relevance has relevance to K12 up here. Now, if you really keep looking at this slide, way down at the bottom, you see relevance to K12 education. Well, that's an issue because we're not even paying attention to that. 2, it's not a minimum of 24 font. So I don't recommend that you do what this group did here. I do recommend that you put relevance to K12 education in every slide at the top. Now, here's another piece. This is not 24 font, and with this much text like this and no bullet points, the challenge or the temptation is going to be for the presenter to stand and look at the screen and read every single word. If you're looking at the rubric and you're looking at the instructor evaluation guide, it's very difficult to maintain eye contact with your audience when you're looking at a screen and you're reading it. I also don't see any in-text citations. APA is the rule of the land in your social science coursework. Education is a social science class. Therefore, the style manual that we use is APA. Now, here's something that hurt my feelings a little bit when I was in my doctorate program. My advisor told me that I was a nobody until I had 3 letters behind my name. And, sad but true, nobody really cared about my opinion. Nobody would listen to what I had to say as a author or as a writer until I got that doctorate. And sadly, you're in the same boat. You can't just say anything about a topic, even if you have a lot of experience, unless you have those 3 letters behind your name. So, this is missing the in-text citations. And this is a research presentation. It is not an opinion presentation. So you must have citations on every slide. Again, I don't see relevance to K12 education here. Then I have a change in font color. And then I have, this looks like it's a little better in terms of 24 font. But then we change from this type to this type. This is bold. That's not bold. I still don't see an in-text citation. I see something a little closer to trying to give credit to the University of Michigan, but who told you that it was from the University of Michigan? Okay. Negative implications. All right. So what happened to relevance? Are we done with relevance? There's a lot in the relevance. There's history. There are prominent figures. This is when the issue became widespread. There's a whole bunch of stuff that isn't talked about, but now all of a sudden we're flipping to negative implications. Your organizational structure, the coherence and organization that I've given to you, is you go first with the relevance to K12 education. You next go to the positive implications. You next go to the negative implications, and then you address the implications for student achievement. This jumped right to negative implications. But look, we do have an effort at an in-text citation and an effort at it with APA. But again, some sloppiness here. There should be, at minimum, a space. But I don't know if I'm missing an and or an ampersand or what. All right. So, and then we've got font size that's a little easier to read. But again, there are some issues. We do have an image, and it's the correlation seems to be there that alcohol and tobacco use. Look, a pregnant woman with alcohol and tobacco. So I think the image is working here. All right, negative implications again. You got some more font size changes. We do have another effort at APA. Again, some sloppiness there. Not sure if that's appropriate there. I'd have to see the citation. Again, kids at Stay Dreaming seems to have some good correlation between the image. We have a better effort at citations. The problem for me, though, is that negative implications doesn't involve the student achievement. So this all seems to fit the implications for student achievement. What does ADHD have to do, or what are the negative implications? Well, kids who have ADHD have a hard time paying attention. They daydream. They don't seem to listen. This has no place in the section on negative implications. So pay careful attention to the criteria that you're being asked to address. All right, more negative implications. Again, this is the kid. This isn't the policy at the federal, state, or local level. It doesn't have anything to do with the districts. It doesn't have anything to do with administration. It doesn't have anything to do with curriculum and teachers. It has more to do with a child. Therefore, this information goes in the section on implications for student achievement. All right, and then we have a checklist. Where does this fit? Is this in relevance to K12 education? Positive implications, negative implications, implications for student achievement? I don't know. It just pops up. So, again, this is issues with coherence and organization. Oh, now we're back to relevance to K12 education. All right, so again, some issues with coherence and organization. Okay. Once again, more K12. Oh, and then there's that great spenny thing. No, not. This is really an informative presentation. It's not a creative presentation. There's plenty of times to be creative. This is not one of them. All right, so up and then more. Now we're jumping back to negative implications. So this looks like it might have something to do with widespread of a problem, how often it's diagnosed. This could be something, if we look at how widespread the problem is, again, go back to those guiding questions and determine where your information fits. All right, more negative implications. Now we're jumping back to relevance to K12 education. Now more relevance to K12 education. Again, widespread, seems like it's some good stuff there. Nice imagery here. Little better attention to detail here with the comma and the space and the date. You'd have to really double check if this is an appropriate citation. But it is a citation on the slide, so that is getting closer. Okay, more relevance to K12 education. Good imagery. Back to negative implications, misdiagnosis. Again, I don't see what this has to do with policy at the federal, state, or local level. What it has to do with decision making by districts, building administrators, or teachers and curriculum. Still, positive implications. Again, you still have the same set of criteria. Looking at federal, state, and local policy. Looking at the implications for decision making at the district and site level, curriculum. So all of this stuff is really out of place. All right, side effects. This is more with the implications for student achievement. So the negative implications of the drugs for ADHD. Seems like that might be more of the issue, is treating ADHD as opposed to ADHD itself. So there's some confusion here in terms of what the focus is. These are the kinds of conversations and the critical thinking that you need to have as a group as you're going through your information. And again, some sloppiness again here. And what size font, The minimum everything can be is 24. Okay, so we're just going to keep going. This changes font size again, sloppiness there, safety concerns. Now it seems like we're back to talking about the medications as opposed to talking about ADHD. I don't know what this is. Abuses, alcohol, tobacco, illicit drugs. Not sure what all of this is. So you've got to be clear. Then we jump to positive implications again. So are we talking about the treatment of ADHD? Not sure. Now we get to student achievement. Student note if he or she is on task. Seems like this is talking about the behavior of a teacher. So what are the implications for decision making by the teacher? So this isn't the student. What are the implications for the student? But this looks like what the teacher should be doing. Behavior management techniques, monitoring the student's behavior. This again seems like it is focusing on what the teacher should be doing as opposed to what the impacts are on the student. And politics and innovators, I'm not sure. Are these all people who had ADHD? Maybe that should be something that is in the relevance to K12 education as in regard to how widespread ADHD is in the population, but it doesn't seem like it fits here. And then again, seems like more Will Smith and Tom Cruise. Are they both ADHD? Is this Michael Jordan or who? Yep, Michael Jordan right there. Michael Phelps, Walt Disney. Yeah, that could show the widespread usage or the widespread representation of ADHD in the population. References. These do not appear to really be an APA style. They're not 24 font. They're not formatted in the proper way for an APA. This looks closer, but I'm not quite sure. So this is where you need to make sure that you are understanding and getting the help and support. And then here's some more. This looks a little better. There needs to be the spaces between, at least in the spaces. And that's it. So what I want to say is if you want me to go over this in class, then I am happy to do so. I don't recommend that I take any more than 20 minutes tomorrow. That leaves you with about 45 minutes to work collaboratively as a group. And then you have Thursday. If this is enough information for your group, then there is no reason for me to get up there and talk. There is one last thing I want to talk to you about, though. And that is the instructor evaluation form. Now, this is available to you in your Google Drive folder. Now, while you are doing your presentation, this is what I'm going to be working with and typing on, using this in conjunction with your presentation rubric. I'll be matching the content evidence of research to the content evidence of research. The weight of that category is 12. It's times 3. Again, 4, 3, 2, 1. The highest score you can get is a 4, then a 3, the 2, a 1. I can do a 0.5 for those. So if I'm looking at the document or the presentation I just went over, I'm going to say that it's a 2 in terms of the content of and evidence of research, because it seems like one or more aspects of the issue are not addressed. Information is not scholarly. It's not clearly connected to each aspect of the issue. Demonstrates adequate understanding. I think the group had an understanding of ADHD, but I don't think they demonstrated real clarity of what it is. I couldn't tell at times if they were talking about the actual condition of ADHD or were they talking about medicating students with ADHD. At times they were talking about strategies for the teachers, but I didn't see anything dealing with policy. So that was tough for me. Coherence and organization, as I pointed out, that was pretty poor. So I think that's a 1, and I think that 1 is being generous there. And so looking back here at the 1, it lacks a clear organizational structure, details that seem to be randomly placed. I was pretty confused during the presentation. All right, so then if I look at slide format, my slide format, was it easily readable? Follows the 7x7 rule. Font size at least 24. I didn't have any film clips that were there. The slide labeling was terrible. So I come over here and it's several errors. The text was too small at times. The background distracts from the text in the sense that it's too dark for the room. So I'm thinking that we're probably a 1.5 here. Now, I'm not going to complete this whole thing. I encourage you to do that as a group. Talk about the score, the evaluation, the rubric. We've had a little practice in that area with the 6 traits. And take a look at what you would get it. Also give the, take a look at what you would give this presentation, but also look at your own presentation. Look at it to see if you're missing the mark anywhere. Okay? And then I will be writing individual comments for each of you, and then I will write group comments. When I'm done, then I will copy and paste the group comments into each group member's folder, or each group member's evaluation sheet. And then I will print this out, and each of you will get your own scored sheet. You are all getting the same grade for this part, and individually you're getting your grades here. All right, so again, sorry for the long video, but I really wanted to not take class time from you tomorrow if you preferred to work together and not have me interrupt your work time. However, if you want 15 to 20 minutes from me, I'm willing to do that too. All right, students, see you tomorrow.